Hello viewers, yes, this is Ranjana ma'am and you are watching Yes, yours as well as my channel. And yes, you know, my thumbnail has already told you what this video is about. Yes, it is the second part of To Build a Fire, and yet I cannot tell that I'll be able to finish this in the second part only because it is such a lengthy chapter. So at least one more, because if I go on trying to finish it in this one, by the time I finish it, it will be more than an hour and you all will also get bored and you all will stop seeing my video. So rather it's better we do it in parts. First part I have done, many of you have read it and you all are asking me for the second part, and now second part, some more chapters, because there are 16 pages, or rather 16 sides I guess. So whatever it is, it's a very lengthy one and it doesn't go fast also. It's a bit monotonous. So second part today, and you all will have to wait for the third part. So what are we waiting for? Let's start. But you know what's coming. Before we start, if you have not subscribed to my channel up till now, please do. And don't forget to press the like button, and yes, share this video with your friends. You remember my target, at least 100k before I stop my teaching at all. If I stop my teaching, a time has to come when I'll retire, but before that I want my 100k. So please, please, please help me. Yes, to build a fire, we had stopped at the last paragraph of page 38 in our part 1. And today we pick up from where we had stopped. That means the last 3 lines of page 38, we start our second part from there. Once in a while, the thought reiterated itself that it was very cold, and he had never experienced such cold. Remember that old timer at Sulphur Creek had warned him, and he said, "What is it? I have gone out in minus 50 degree. 50 degree below freezing point. If I have my mittens and my moccasins and all these things, no problem." And now he realizes, no, it's not so easy. This is for the first time that he is experiencing such cold. As he walked along, he rubbed his cheekbones. Why? Because this is exposed. Yes, you can cover your hands with your mittens, you can cover your feet with moccasins, you can be wearing trousers, jackets and all that. But what about your cheekbones? What about your nose? And nose with the back of his mittened hand. So his hands are mittened. Mittened is a type of glove only, but all these 4 fingers make one and another one. So you don't have special separate entries for these fingers. All of them together is one and another. So there are only 2 spaces. So mitten hand, so he is rubbing the back of his mitten hand to his nose to stop the frost from settling here. These are the places exposed. He did this automatically, now and again changing his hands. Once he does it with this hand, then again he does it with this hand. But rub as he would, the instant he stopped, his cheekbones went numb, and the following instant the end of his nose went numb. But how can you keep on continuing like this and like this? And you have to stop, and when you stop, the next moment the cheekbones get frozen first and then his nose becomes numb, as if paralyzed. He was sure to frost his cheek, so he feels, I cannot continue in this way, so my cheek will get frosted. He knew that and experienced a pang of regret that he had not devised a nose strap of the sort Bud wore in Cold Snap. So Bud is one companion. Bud, when he went out in extreme cold, what did he do? He used a nose strap. Yeah, that would be a cover for the nose. You can breathe, but it will not be exposed to the cold. So Bud, his friend or companion, one of his companion, he had a nose strap. So he feels, why didn't I design one for myself? Such a strap passed across the cheeks as well and saved them. So if he had the one like Bud had, it would have saved his nose and his cheeks. But he is not a very intelligent person, and I think he's a bit headstrong. He doesn't care. He doesn't he doesn't accept what other people say. He doesn't take the warnings of others. A headstrong person, and headstrong person never are, what should we say, they are never in peace, and that is what happens with him. But it didn't matter much after all. What were frosted cheeks? A bit painful, that was all. They were never serious. So what if I have a frosted cheek? They're not so serious. It might be a bit painful. The worst is to come. Just see what is happening. Empty as the man's mind was of thoughts, he was keenly observant. Though there were no thoughts troubling him in his mind, but he was observant. Yes, this is one good quality. He notices everything. And he noticed the changes in the creek, the curves, the bends and timber jams. And always he sharply noted where he placed his feet. Yes, this is very important. So on his way, he just doesn't walk. He notices whatever is coming before him, where he is putting his foot forward. And he has to be careful. Why? Once coming round a bend, he shied abruptly like a startled horse, curved away from the place he had been walking and retreated several spaces back along the trail. While he was walking, suddenly, most probably he had a premonition of danger. So what did he do? Instead of going forward, he ran backwards. He retreated few steps. The creek, he knew, was frozen clear to the bottom. No creek could contain water in that Arctic winter. Yes, the creek is frozen, it cannot contain water, but he knew also that there were springs that bubbled out from the hillsides and ran along under the snow and on the top of the ice of the creek. So there were springs, and the waters from the springs came bubbling down, and where did they hide themselves? Under the snow on top and the ice of the water of the springs underneath. And these were dangerous because on top the snow was not so strong, and if you put your foot there, you might go down, the ice might break, and then you will get wet. And if you get wet, that's the worst thing to happen. We are proceeding to it, just see. He knew the coldest snaps never froze these springs. So however cold it might be, but these springs and their bubbling water, they never got frozen. So, and he knew likewise their danger. And what is the danger? They were traps. They hid pools of water under the snow that might be 3 inches deep or 3 feet deep. So pools of water under the snow can be 3 inches deep, it can be 3 feet deep. And by chance, if you put your foot there and the ice cracks, you might land yourself in 3 inches, then that is little less worse. But if you get 3 feet in the deep water, you are done. Why? Because in this cold, the moment you come out of it, you have seen that when he spits also, it turns to ice. So that wet feet, the moment he comes out of it, it will become frozen and he wouldn't be able to walk. When he exhaled, the moisture, the air which came out with the moisture, that became frozen and they settled on his eyebrows and his nose and all these places, beard. So if he by chance gets wet, once he comes out, he will be frozen. That portion which is wet will become immediately frozen, just like his spit, or just like the beetle, just like the juice, tobacco juice coming out and then turning into a brown snow. Sometimes a skin of ice half an inch thick covered them. The water was sometimes covered by half-inch thick ice, not at all much, and in turn was covered by the snow. Sometimes there were alternate layers of water and ice skin, water, ice skin, then again water, and then again snow. So that when one broke through, he kept on breaking through for a while, sometimes wetting himself to the waist. So suppose someone broke through the snow, there was water, and then again the thin sheet of ice, and then again water. So in that way, if he lands in this type of situation, he is sure to get wet till his waist. That was why he had shied in such panic. That was why he had run away in fear. He had felt the give under his feet and heard the crackle of a snow-hidden ice skin. So while he had put his foot forward, he had as if heard the snow crack, and the next moment he ran back before he could fall into the water. And to get his feet wet in such a temperature meant trouble and danger. At the very least, it meant delay, for he would be forced to stop and build a fire, and under its protection to his bare feet while he dried his socks and moccasins. So if he got wet, what was the next thing he was forced to do? To build a fire. He could not proceed in that way with his feet and everything wet, because they would become snow, the ice, they would turn to ice, it would become frozen. So the next thing that he would be forced to do was to build a fire, remove his moccasins, remove his socks, dry them in the heat of the fire, and then only he could put them and proceed in his journey. So what did this mean? That his journey would be delayed. He had planned that if he went in this way, at 12:30 he will be at the fork having his lunch, and from there by 6 he would be at the camp joining the boys. But if he lands in such a trouble and builds a fire and has to wait till his things got dried up, then his journey will be delayed and he wouldn't be able to reach the camp by 6. He stood and studied the creek bed and its banks and decided that the flow of water came from the right. So that flow of water came from the right side. He reflected a while, he thought a while, rubbing his nose and his cheeks, then skirted to the left. Now he takes it is coming from the right, so let me move towards the left, stepping gingerly and testing the footing for each step. Each step that he took, it was a cautious step. He tested before he made his next foot forward. Once clear of danger, he took a fresh chew of tobacco and swung along at his 4-mile gait. So he knew that this place was dangerous. So I'll have to be very careful. Let me cross this place carefully. So he does it. And once he is able to do it, then again he picks up speed, and yes, he started walking in the same manner as he had done when he had started his journey, 4 miles an hour. So in the course of the next 2 hours, he came across several traps. So one trap he escapes now and picks up his speed. But for the next 2 hours, that was not the last. He comes across several traps, but he escapes them. Usually the snow above the hidden pools had a sunken, candid appearance that advertised the danger. So usually what happened, the snow above these hidden water of the springs, they somehow gave him the advertisement that this is dangerous. So he got an idea, see, this place is dangerous, this is one of the trap, so I'll have to move a little away and proceed with my journey. Once again, however, he had a close call. Close call, what does it mean? He was on the verge of setting his foot and getting trapped. So what did he do? And once, so he escaped it, but that was a close call, a narrow escape. But after that, once suspecting danger, and again it happened that he suspected there is another trap here, So what does he do this time? He doesn't put his foot forward, rather he tries to push the dog. He compelled the dog to go on in front. Yes, pushing the dog, so that if the ice breaks, the dog's foot would be in the water, and that would warn him that yes, he will have to change his route a little. But the dog is also very clever, and it doesn't want to be pushed. It knows there might be danger. The dog did not want to go, no, reluctant. It hung back until the man shoved it forward. Yes, so it is trying to stay back, but he pushes the dog forward. No. And then it went quickly across the white unbroken surface. So the dog, when it is being shoved and pushed, so it tried to go very fast through the unbroken surface of the snow, but suddenly it broke through, floundered to one side and got away to firmer footing. So what happened? It broke through. That means yes, he breaks through into the snow. He falls to one side and then he got away to firmer footing. So this footing where he had put his foot was not a firm one, and he had floundered. It had wet its 4 feet and legs. So the first 2 feet they get wet. 4 feet and legs, and almost immediately the water that clung to it turned to ice. This is the danger I told you. The moment his 4 feet and legs they get wet, and he pulls it out of the water, the next moment what happens? They freeze. Like the spit of that man, the moment it comes out of his mouth, before it could fall to the ground and become snow, it midway only it turns to snow. Same for this dog. Next moment his feet, that wet portion gets frozen. So what does it do? It turns to ice. It made quick efforts to lick the ice off its legs, then dropped down in the snow and began to bite out the ice that had formed between the toes. So yes, it tries to save itself on its own. So what does it do? Tries to lick the ice that has formed in between his toes. First he tries to lick, and then he tries to bite out the ice. This was a matter of instinct. To permit the ice to remain would mean sore feet. And he had this idea: if I allow the ice, if I allow the ice to remain in between my toes, I will suffer from sore feet. It did not know this. It merely obeyed the mysterious prompting that arose from the deep crypts of its being. Yes, they believe on their instincts, and we believe in our knowledge and experience. Sometimes you'll find their instincts are more keener than our knowledge and experience. But the man knew, having achieved a judgment on the subject, and he removed the mitten from his right hand and helped tear out the ice particles. So he helps the dog to tear out the ice particles from its feet. So he removes his mitten, because his mittened hand could not do the job. But he had not done it for long. He did not expose his fingers more than a minute to clear that ice from the toes of the dog. It was not even a minute, but see what happens. And was astonished at the swift numbness that smote them. And the next moment he is surprised. Why? Shocked. His fingers, which he had removed not even for 1 minute, within this time it becomes numb, paralyzed. So, swift numbness that smote his fingers, hit his fingers as if. It certainly was cold. Now he realizes, yes, it certainly is cold. He pulled on the mittens hastily and beat the hand savagely across his chest. So this hand, suppose it has got paralyzed because he had removed the mittens and tried to do away with the ice, and now it has got frozen. So he immediately puts on the mitten and tries to beat the hand. Why? So that the feeling of numbness leaves. At 12 o'clock, the day was at its brightest, yet the sun was too far south on its winter journey to clear the horizon. Yet no sun visible. The day is at its brightest, but the sun doesn't show itself. Why? It is in its southern journey. The bulge of the earth intervened between it and Henderson Creek, where the man walked under a clear sky at noon and cast no shadow. There is no shadow forming in the ice. The sun is not visible, but it is a clear sky. At 12:30, to the minute, he arrived at the forks of the creek. What calculation? He had expected to be there by 12:30. Why? Because he had felt, if I cover 4 miles in 1 hour and I have 10 miles to cover before I come to the fork, so I will reach there by 12:30, and he does it. He was pleased at the speed he had made. So, and if I continue in this manner, by 6 I will be at the camp. So, if he kept it up, he would certainly be with the boys by 6. Boys are his other team members. They have already reached it. He unbuttoned his jacket and shirt and drew forth his lunch. Remember, they touched his skin, the lunch, and then the shirt, and then the jacket. The action consumed no more than a quarter of a minute. Quarter of a minute means 15 seconds. Yet in that brief moment, the numbness laid hold of his exposed fingers. So he removes his mitten and tries to take out his food, the lunch. And it is hardly 15 seconds, but the numbness comes and troubles his fingers. He did not put the mitten on, but instead struck the fingers a dozen sharp smashes against his legs. Yes, he goes on hitting. Yes, why? So that the blood circulation continues, so that the hand doesn't get frozen, it doesn't get numb. So he doesn't put on the mitten. Yes, in this way he keeps on hitting his hand on his leg. Then he sat down on a snow-covered log to eat. Yes, he is having his lunch. The sting that had followed upon the striking of his fingers against his leg ceased so quickly that he was startled. So he tried and he thought, for some moments at least I will be at peace with my hand, but no. He had had no chance to take a bite of biscuit. Again they become frozen. He struck the fingers repeatedly and returned them to the mitten. They were exposed. So he hits his fingers repeatedly and then again he puts on the mitten. But with the mittened hand he cannot eat his food. Now he changes to the other hand, bearing the other hand for the purpose of eating. So now he uncovers the mitten of the other hand. So the other hand is exposed and he uses this hand to eat his food. He tried to take a mouthful, but the ice muzzle prevented. He had forgotten to build a fire and thaw out. Yes, the ice muzzle on his nose and his cheeks, they are serving as an obstacle. So he should have built a fire so that they got melted. They would melt, and then only he could have his food peacefully. He chuckled at his foolishness. Chuckled is when you laugh silently, you don't make noise. As he chuckled, he noted the numbness creeping into the exposed fingers. The other hand which he exposed, the numbness is coming into them now. Also, he noted that the stinging which had first come to his toes when he sat down was already passing away. The stinging feeling, it happens many times. I don't know whether you have gone to very cold places. I remember, yes, a stinging feeling when you remove your gloves or something, but not numbness. That is different. So now he feels the stinging is going. So he wants to know whether the stinging is disappearing because they are warm or are they numb. So why is the stinging going away? He wondered whether the toes were warm or numb. If they were warm, very good. If they were numb, danger. He moved them inside the moccasins and decided they were numb. Yeah, he tries to move his toes inside the moccasins, but he can't. And then he realizes that the sting is gone, stinging feeling is gone because my toes, they have become numb, not warm but numb. He pulled the mitten on hurriedly and stood up. He was a bit frightened. Now what to do? He stamped up and down until the stinging returned into the feet. So what does he do? He stamps his feet. to stop the feet from getting frozen, the toes from getting frozen, from getting numb. It certainly was cold, was his thought. Now he realizes that time too he had rubbed aside the idea when that man from the Sulphur Creek had warned him, take someone with you. That man from Sulphur Creek had spoken the truth when telling how cold it sometimes got in the country. That man had warned him, see, sometimes it gets too cold, it is beyond the endurance of human beings. But he had not given him any importance, and now he realizes, no, that man had told the truth. And he had laughed at him at the time. Yes, he had ridiculed the idea. Oh, I had been at minus 50. But this is colder, this is minus 75. That showed one must not be too sure of things. Don't be overconfident. That is what overconfidence brings your ruin. And that is what is going to happen to this man. There was no mistake about it. It was cold. Was is in italics. Emphasizing, yes. He strode up and down, stamping his feet and threshing his arms until reassured by the returning warmth. So he keeps on walking in that place only to bring the warmth back to his toes, and so that the numbness goes away, the numb feeling goes away. Then he got out matches and proceeded to make a fire. This is the right thing. From the undergrowth, where high water of the previous spring had lodged a supply of seasoned twigs. Twigs are small branches. He got his firewood. So yes, he gets some twigs. Working carefully from a small beginning, he soon had a roaring fire. Yeah, he started with a small fire and then he kept on adding fuel to it with the help of these twigs, and then he is able to build a big fire, over which he thawed the ice from his face. So he puts his face closer to the fire to see that the ice which had settled on his cheekbones and nose, that they melt. And in the protection of which he ate his biscuits, under the protection of the fire. Now his hands will not get numb if he removes the mittens and eats with his bare hands, because the fire is roaring fire. For the moment the cold of space was outwitted. Yeah, he had defeated the cold for the moment, but not for long. Nature cannot be defeated. The dog took satisfaction in the fire, stretching out close enough for warmth and far enough to escape being stung. The dog is a really intelligent creature. So what does it do? It goes so close to the fire that he could get the warmth, but he doesn't get too close to the fire that he gets burned. So he knows where his limitations are. When the man had finished, he filled his pipe and took his comfortable time over a smoke. Even he has time for smoking. Then he pulled on his mittens. This would be the last smoke. Settled the ear flaps of his cap firmly about his ears and took the trail up the left fork. So remember, the path forks into two. He will take the left fork. Fork means when something divides itself into two. Suppose this is one, it is coming and then it divides into two, and he takes the left path. The dog was disappointed. Why? Because it had to leave the fire and yearned back toward the fire. This man did not know cold. Possibly all the generations of his ancestry had been ignorant of cold, of real cold, of cold 107 degrees below freezing point. 107 degrees below freezing point. And he had no idea how cold it could be. But the dog had the idea, but the dog knew. All its ancestry knew, yes. Why? Its forefathers and the previous generation, they also knew what it is. 107 degrees below freezing point. And it had inherited the knowledge. And it knew it was an inherited trait. It knew that it was not good to walk abroad in such fearful cold. So the dog knows better than the human being. This fearful cold is not the time to keep on walking. is the time to build a fire and stay close. It was the time for them to remain in their burrows like rabbits. During winter they go for a hibernation. They get inside their burrows and they don't come out throughout the winter. Thus reptiles. It was the time to lie snug in a hole in the snow and wait for a curtain of cloud to be drawn across the face of outer space whence this cold came. So yes, dig a hole inside and go there and let a sheet of ice cover the hole so that the cold wind from the outer space did not come and trouble him. Like the Eskimos, they live in ice houses and yet those ice houses are quite warm. On the other hand, there was no keen intimacy between the dog and the man. The dog follows the man, but they are not good friends. The dog belongs to the man, but he is not happy with his master. Why? Because this master treats him very badly. Not a really good master. The one was the toil slave of the other. Yes, this dog was as if a poor slave of this man. The other only the only caresses it had ever received were the caresses of the whiplash and of harsh and menacing throat sounds that threatened the whiplash. So the man never caressed this dog. So if the man ever touched him, it was with his whip. And before whipping, the frightful sounds that he made to threaten the dog. So who would love this type of master? Who would develop an intimacy with this type of cruel master? So the dog made no effort to communicate its apprehension to the man. So it doesn't try to show its fear to the man. It was not concerned in the welfare of the man. Let the devil take him. I am not concerned. It was for its own sake that it yearned back towards the fire. So why did it want to go back to the fire? For his own sake, not for the sake of the man. But the man whistled and spoke to it with the sound of whiplashes. And the man, he whistled because he has to reach the camp by 6. He couldn't wait here and waste time. So he whistled out to the dog, and the way he spoke, it was as if hitting him like a whiplash. So the dog had no other option but to follow the man, and the dog swung in at the man's heels and followed after. The man took a chew of tobacco and proceeded to start a new amber head. Again a new amber head. Yes. The juice, tobacco juice, yes, coming out and getting frozen and becoming amber colored. Also his moist breath, the breath which he is exhaling, quickly powdered with white, his moustache, his eyebrows and eyelashes. So the moisture which comes out when he exhales the wind, the moment they come out, they turn into a white powdery substance, the white snow, powdery snow, and settles on his eyebrows, on his eyelashes and on his moustaches. There did not seem to be so many springs on the left fork of the Henderson. So here there are not so many springs as he had experienced before he came to this fork. And for half an hour the man saw no signs of any. So he is getting more confident. So he had hardly come across any spring or the bubbling water under the sheet of ice. And then it happened. When he had become confident that there wouldn't be any more springs lurking under the snow, and he had become a little careless, and then it happened. At a place where there were no signs, remember in the other incidents, in the other traps, as if the snow had advertised the warning. But here nothing like that, no advertisement, no warning given, and suddenly what happens? Where the soft unbroken snow seemed to advertise solidity beneath. So this snow advertised that it was quite solid underneath, and the man, as he put his foot, it broke through. This is what he had been dreading. It was not deep. He wet himself halfway to the knees before he floundered out to the firm crust. So thankfully it's not up to the waist but till his knees. And he flounders up out of that water. He was angry and cursed his luck aloud. He had hoped to get into camp with the boys at 6 o'clock and this would delay him an hour. Why? Because now he would have to again build a fire. For he would have to build a fire and dry out his footgear. The socks, the moccasins. This was imperative at that low temperature. He knew that much. And he turned aside to the bank which he climbed. So he turns to the bank and he climbs it. On top, tangled in the underbrush about the trunks of several small spruce trees, was a high water deposit of dry firewood. Yeah, in order to build a fire, he needs fuel. So he climbs up the bank and then he goes to the spruce trees, and there quite a lot of dry firewood. Sticks and twigs principally. Mostly they were twigs, small branches. But also larger portions of seasoned branches and fine dry last year's grasses. So last year's grasses would be dry. They would serve well as fuel for the fire. He threw down several large pieces on top of the snow. This served for a foundation, a groundwork, and prevented the young flames from drowning itself in the snow. It otherwise would melt. So the flame he got by touching a match to a small shed of birch bark. Birches, you have it in your poems. So it is a type of tree. So he had in his pocket the barks of birch trees. Why? This would help in the building up of the fire. So he takes out one piece of birch bark from his pocket. This burnt even more readily than paper, much more inflammable than paper. Placing it on the foundation, like we use cow dung cakes to build fire in the villages, not in towns. Placing it on the foundation, what? The birch bark. He fed the young flame with wisps of dry grass and with the tiniest dry twigs. So this is how he is feeding them and building up the fire, and later he will put big logs. But see what happens, the accident that takes place. He walked slowly and carefully, keenly aware of his danger. Gradually, as the flame grew stronger, he increased the size of the twigs with which. So when it is small, he gives small twigs. When it picks up, it starts glowing, becoming stronger. Then he feeds it with, big fire needs big twigs also. He squatted on the snow, pulling the twigs out from their entanglement in the brush and feeding directly to the flame. He knew there must be no failure. If I fail to warm myself and if I fail to dry my moccasins and my socks, I am done. When it is 75 below zero, a man must not fail in his first attempt to build a fire. That is, if his feet are wet. If his feet are wet, he should build a fire and dry it. If his feet are dry and he fails, he can run along the trail for half a mile and restore his circulation. Yes, in order to restore his blood circulation, in order to stop his feet from getting numb, he can run provided his feet are dry. But now that they are wet, if he moves away from the fire, they'll get frozen. As it happens when he spits and that spit becomes ice, his feet will become frozen. But the circulation of wet and freezing feet cannot be restored by running when it is 75 below. No matter how fast he runs, the wet feet will freeze the harder. The more you run, the worse it becomes. All this the man knew. The old timer on Sulphur Creek, that man who had given him all the advice, had told him about it the previous fall. about the previous fall, and now he was appreciating the advice. He had spoken the truth. Already all sensation had gone off his feet. Why? It was wet. To build the fire, he had been forced to remove his mittens, and the fingers had gone quickly numb. So the feet numb, the fingers numb. So how will he light the fire? His pace of 4 miles an hour had kept his heart pumping blood to the surface of his body and to all the extremities. Yes, when he was walking at 4 miles an hour, so his heart was pumping the blood, so there was an exercise, and naturally the blood circulation was going fine. But now that he is sitting in front of the trying to build up a fire, the blood circulation is not so good as it was before. The cold of the space smote the unprotected tip of the planet, and he, being on that unprotected tip, received the full force of the blow, full force of the cold. The blood of his body recoiled before it. The blood of his body recoiled before the cold. The blood was alive like the dog, and like the dog it wanted to hide away and cover itself up from the fearful cold. The cold was such that the blood within him was as if getting frozen. So it is like the dog trying to go and seek shelter somewhere, maybe underneath the ice, so that it is not exposed to the cold. So long as he walked 4 miles an hour, he pumped that blood willy-nilly to the surface. But now it ebbed away and sank down in the recesses of his body. The extremities were the first to feel its absence. The outward ones, the fingers, the toes, they are the extremities. The tips of the nose, the cheeks, they are the ones to feel the numbness, the lack of blood circulation. They are the ones to feel it first. His wet feet froze the faster, and his exposed fingers numbed the faster, though they had not yet begun to freeze. But they are becoming numb. Nose and cheeks were already freezing. They are more exposed, while the skin of all his body chilled as it lost its blood. So the blood circulation is not really going fine, and so his body becomes cold. But he was safe. Toes and nose and cheeks would only be touched by the frost, for the fire was beginning to burn with strength. So he feels, but I am safe. Why? Because now the fire is picking up. So soon the ice and everything will melt, will thaw. He was feeding it with twigs the size of his finger. In another minute, he would be able to feed it with branches the size of his wrist. And then he could remove his wet footgear. And while it dried, he could keep his naked feet warm by the fire, rubbing them at first, of course, with snow. So once the fire picks up very well, then what will he do? He will remove his wet moccasins and his wet socks, and the exposed feet will also get warm by the fire, and these also will become dry on account of the heat of the fire. This is his plan. The fire was a success. He was safe. He remembered the advice of the old timer on Sulphur Creek and smiled. The old timer had been very serious in laying about the law that no man must travel alone in the Klondike after 50 below. When it is 50 degree below zero, you should not travel alone. So he is laughing at that man. See, soon he will regret it. He will regret it. You know why. You will come to know why. Well, here he was again. His boasting has not left him. Here he was. He had had the accident. He was alone and he had saved himself. Accident what? Getting wet. These old timers are rather womanish. They are like women in their temperament. Some of them, he thought, all a man had to do was to keep his head. All a man had to do was to keep his head, and he was all right. Any man who was a man could travel alone. Yeah. So now he ridicules the idea. They were womanish, but a real man can travel alone. But it was surprising the rapidity with which his cheeks and noses were freezing. Yes, the speed with which his cheeks and nose they were getting frozen, and he had not thought his fingers could go lifeless in so short a time. So in very short time his fingers again became numb. He had not lifeless they were, for he could scarcely make them move together to grip a twig. They had become so numb that he could not hold a twig with his fingers. And they seemed remote from his body and from him, as if they were not a part of his body. They hardly seemed to be a part of his body. When he touched a twig, he had to look and see whether or not he had hold of it. So he is touching the twig, but he doesn't feel the sensation. So he has to see whether I have really held the twig in my fingers or not, because when you hold something you get that sensation, but he doesn't feel that sensation. The wires were pretty well torn between him and his finger ends, so as if there was no connection existing between his fingertips and himself, all of which counted for little, but it didn't matter. There was the fire, snapping and crackling and promising life with every dancing flame. He started to untie his moccasins. They were coated with ice. The thick German socks were like sheets of iron halfway to the knees. Sheets of iron, why? Because they were becoming ice. And the moccasin strings were like rods of steel, all twisted and knotted as if by some conflagration. For a moment he tugged with his numb fingers. So he tried to pull with his numb fingers, but he could not untie the lace of the moccasin. So what did he do? Then, realizing the folly of it, he drew his sheath knife. With the sheath knife he will cut the strings. But before he could cut the strings, it happened what? There was a sudden accident. It was his own fault, or rather his mistake. What was his mistake? He should not have built the fire under the spruce tree. See the accident which takes place, and that could be one reason that brought about his death. He should have built it in the open, not under the shade of a tree. He should have built it in the open. But it had been easier to pull the twigs from the brush. But why did he build it under the tree? Because yes, the fire is here and you take one twig from the tree. But in this way what happened? The upper branches of the tree, which all the branches of the tree were covered with frost and snow. So when he pulls one twig, so the upper branches, they also start getting moved. They also become agitated. And what happened? Just see. Now the tree under which he had done this carried a weight of snow on its boughs. So the branches of the trees were carried with quite heavy snow. No wind had blown for weeks, and each bough was fully freighted. So each branch was very heavy with snow, because no wind had blown, so the snow had settled on the branches. They did not fall to the ground. Each time he had pulled a twig, he had communicated a slight agitation to the tree, an imperceptible agitation so far as he was concerned. So he could not notice the agitation of the tree, but there was an agitation, but an agitation sufficient to bring about the disaster. Yes, strong enough to bring about the disaster. Now what is the disaster that the author is referring to? High up in the tree, one bough, one branch, capsized its load of snow. So the load of snow which was in the branch, it came down, capsized. It fell on the boughs beneath. The snow fell on the branches beneath, and then that snow of the upper branch along with the snow on which it falls, so the two snows together falls on the third one, and in this way the third branch along with the snow of the top one and the middle one and its own snow, it falls, and in this way the snow becomes heavier and heavier, and finally they come and land on the fire, and the fire blows out. This fell on the boughs beneath, capsizing them. This process continued, spreading out and involving the whole tree. It grew like an avalanche, yes, moving blocks of ice, avalanche, and it descended without warning. Yeah, before the man could understand, before he could get a warning, this avalanche of snow lands upon the man and the fire. And what happens? The fire gets extinguished. and the fire was blotted out. Where it had burnt was a mantle of fresh and disordered snow. So where the fire was burning, there was no fire left, only lot of disordered snow, fresh and disordered snow. The man was shocked. It was as though he had heard his own sentence of death. Yeah, this is a death sentence because the fire has blown out. He needs to dry his moccasins, he needs to dry his socks, he needs to warm his feet. For a moment he sat and stared at the spot where the fire had been. Then he grew very calm. Perhaps the old timer, yes, that wise man on Sulphur Creek was right. Only a little while ago I told you he was ridiculing that man and calling him womanish. But now he accepts that man was right. What had he said? If he had only a trail mate, that means if he had another companion, because that man had warned that you should not be alone, traveling alone. So if he had another companion, now that he had fallen into the snow, into the water and had wet himself, and he only has to light up the fire, if he had a mate, that mate could have lit the fire for him. The trail mate could have built the fire. Well, it was up to him to build the fire over again, and this second time there must be no failure. He couldn't fail. Even if he succeeded, he most likely would lose some toes. Yeah, his toes would suffer frostbite and he might lose them because no circulation would be, blood circulation would be there. So it would become frostbitten and later they might be amputated. His feet must be badly frozen by now and there would be some time before the second fire was ready. So yes, building a fire is not an easy job. It will take some time. Such were his thoughts, but he did not sit and think them. He was busy all the time. They were passing through his mind. So the thoughts were passing through his mind, but he was busy working what? Trying to build up the fire. He made a new foundation for a fire, but this time not under the tree. He wouldn't repeat his mistake. So this time he is building the fire in the open, where no treacherous tree could blot it out. Next he gathered dry grasses and tiny twigs from the high water flotsam. He could not bring his fingers together to pull them out, but he was able to gather them by the handful. He couldn't pull them out, but he gathered them by the handful. In this way he got many rotten twigs and bits of green moss that were undesirable, but this was the best he could do. This was the best fuel he could get now. He worked methodically, even collecting an armful of the larger branches to be used later when the fire gathered strength. When the fire picked up, he would use these larger branches to help it to continue. And all the while the dog sat and watched him, a certain yearning wistfulness in its eyes, for it looked upon him as the fire provider, and the fire was slow in coming. So we'll stop here. It has already been more than 40 minutes, the video, so I wouldn't proceed with it. I think there will be one more part left for you all before this story really comes to an end. And you have seen we can't go fast with this because every line needs to be explained. So yes, we'll stop here. You go through it, let me know how you liked it, and bye for the time being, and wish you a happy day.